friends, it's Laura. Welcome back to my channel, Aquamarine 18. And I'm just popping on this morning. I have a tiny bit of time with a empty, quiet house. I'm just caffeinating. It's pretty early in the morning. To respond to a new tarot tag, and I think that this one might have actually just come out yesterday. I just saw it yesterday anyway. And I thought that this would be a reasonably short video to make, so I have this little bit of time, so I'll do that. And in some ways, this is a tag I feel like that most of us will hope that we don't have a good answer for and don't want to reply to. Because it is the hashtag Tarot Disaster, started by Jen's Balanced Tarot. I will link her original video in the description box below. And I won't give, spoilers about Jen's Tarot Disaster, but essentially this tag has been prompted by a little accident in Jen's home that caused damage to some of her decks. So she tagged it Tarot Disaster and said, anybody who has had an experience like this could reply. And I don't know if I've actually talked about this on my channel before. Maybe I've mentioned it in brief, but I have a tarot disaster, and my tarot disaster resulted in negative effects to my first ever purchased indie deck, the first one I ever owned, and still one of my favorites, the Heart and Hands Tarot, which is by Liz Blackbird. I bought it on Etsy. I believe it's still in print. It's a really great deck. I have an unwrecked copy because when my tarot disaster happened, I bought the deck again. It's a large deck with black and white, black ink drawings, and there's lots of hearts and lots of hands, as the name suggests. And when I saw this deck, it's just a style that I really, really like. There were very few cards that I didn't care for and so many that I did. I could imagine getting a tattoo based on something in here. Really cool deck. But I had a disaster with it. So I bought this deck, so excited. It was, very definitely the most expensive deck I had ever bought, because at that point I had, buried in the back of my parents' closet somewhere, I had my first ever deck that they had bought me, which was a mass market deck. I had my yellow box Rider-Waite-Smith, which was the only deck I used for years. And then I had one other deck, which was my attempt to branch out from Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which was the Ciro Marchetti Gilded Tarot, which I also still have, which is a very much like Rider-Waite-Smith, but in his style, right? And a mass market deck that I got in a shop. So I had never really bought a deck online. I had definitely never bought an indie deck. This was my cherished, and when I got it, I loved it. And I started doing readings with it and, fell in love and wanted to charge up that deck with that little bit of extra special energy. So I left it on a windowsill to soak up the full moon in my moon sign energy going on outside. With a crystal on top of it, obviously. So I put it there on the windowsill and I left the window open, and it torrentially rained. So my beloved Heart and Hands Tarot got wet. It could have been a lot worse than it was. It wasn't in the box though, so it got wet and sat in a puddle. And all the way around the edges. The pictures in the middle were fine, but all the way around the edges, it rippled and the cards stuck together, and I'd pull them apart and then they would rip, and it was definitely unshuffleable. It was not usable at all. And I was feeling very dejected about it. So I pretty quickly bought another copy because I knew I really loved the deck, and I hadn't seen really other decks that appealed to me. Fast forward to now when I've seen lots of decks that appeal to me and have lots more than 3. But I knew I wanted to have the deck again, so I bought it again. But I kept the wrecked copy thinking I might make a collage or, cut it out and use it in my notebook or something, right? Because the art is great. Then I discovered deck mods, and I saw other people trimming their decks. It had never crossed my mind to trim a deck before. And so I thought, okay, if I'm going to try this deck trimming thing, which I actually have never done since, too scary. And I certainly probably wouldn't do it in an indie deck. Double scary. I've edged a few decks, but that's it. But I saw other people trimming these decks, and I thought, I wonder if I could salvage this deck if I trimmed it. And I just had scissors. I thought, all right, I'm going to try to trim my Heart and Hands Tarot and see if I can save it. Worst case, I can't save it. It's already unusable. I'll give it a go. So I trimmed it, and actually, you know what? For my only deck trim, with a deck that is still kind of damaged in a couple places, it didn't turn out badly. The cutting is not even at all. It's probably hard to see. I did it with scissors. I did my best. And unfortunately, in some places, it does mean, I cut off the 99.9% of the damage. And it does mean that in some places that the artwork is kind of infringed on by the trimming. So you can see now the king goes right to the edge and has a smidgen cut off. Some of them don't, but some of them, it goes right to the edge. And it also kind of draws attention to the fact that now the cards are not really centered. So it's not great. But one thing that was good about this in terms of just the ease of the trimming is that the back, you can see this is the unwrecked one and this is the wet one. The back has these multiple frames. So I did have kind of lines to follow to get something roughly the same size consistently. So I followed that frame on the back. Not very well. Not very well at all. And I did lose some art on the front. But I'm okay with it. And now actually my tarot deck Disaster is functional. And I use both. So this is a really, really large deck in its original form. It's actually still bigger. It's still bigger than a standard tarot deck, even with a substantial amount of the edges cut off. And it did cut quite a bit off. I'll see if I can get it to show. Yeah. So I did cut a substantial amount off the cards, and it's still bigger than a standard deck. There's still a couple places on the edges that the damage is visible and that, it's discolored and things like that. But it was my first ever indie deck purchase, and I didn't want to give up on it, and it was sentimental, so I kept it. And now I still do use it. It obviously does not fit in its box anymore. But as upset by it as I was at the time, I'm happy that my Tarot Disaster actually, it could have been a lot worse in that I was able to kind of turn it into something at least functional. So I'm happy about that. And I have never put a tarot deck on the windowsill ever since. If anything, I'm probably a little bit paranoidly protective of my decks. So I have yet to have another deck disaster. But this deck disaster comes to mind whenever I go to my reading table and think about putting my coffee cup down. And then quickly think Heart and Hands and don't do that. So hopefully this will be my only response ever to Tarot Disaster, because so far I've lucked out and only had one. So if you would like to also respond to Jen's Balanced Tarot on your Tarot deck Disaster, you can use the tag Tarot Disaster as well. And you know what? It's weird for this one to say that I look forward to seeing other people's responses, because I feel like it makes it sound like I look forward to hearing about other people talk about their decks get ruined. And I hope that others have not had decks they love get ruined. but I will watch VRs if others post them. So thanks for watching. Thanks to Jen's Balanced Tarot for starting this quick tag. And I send my best, wishes and hopes to Jen that her tarot disaster can be, kind of mitigated in whatever ways that it can. All the best. And again, thanks for watching. Have a good day.